Yosemite National Park. The name alone conjures images of ancient granite monoliths, thundering waterfalls, and cathedral groves of sequoias that have stood for millennia. Over 4 million visitors flock here annually, drawn by Half Dome's iconic silhouette and the mist of Bridalveil Falls. It's a place of breathtaking beauty, Instagram perfection, and bucket list adventures. But there's another side to this Sierra Nevada wonderland, one that ranger briefings don't mention, and tourist brochures won't show you. Since formal records began in 1909, more than 30 people have vanished in Yosemite without a trace. Not lost and found, not injured and rescued, gone. Completely, utterly, impossibly gone. With over 30 active missing persons cases in continuous, limited search mode, Yosemite holds one of the highest concentrations of unexplained disappearances in the world. We're not talking about inexperienced hikers who took wrong turns. These are cases where people vanish mid-conversation, mid-stride, leaving behind no footprints, no torn clothing, no blood, no bodies, just nothing. Some locals whisper about portal points where reality frays. Others speak of ancient Ahwanichi curses. But the truth is, whatever lurks in these granite halls doesn't discriminate. It's claimed seasoned explorers and first-time visitors, teenagers and elders, solo adventurers, and people in the middle of crowds. I'm Lemino, and this is the Lemon Story Time. Today we're diving into the most haunting disappearances in American national park history. Cases that have baffled search and rescue teams, frustrated investigators, and spawned theories ranging from the rational to the absolutely terrifying. If you're into mysteries that refuse to be solved, unsettling patterns that defy explanation, and stories that'll make you think twice about wandering off the trail, you might enjoy this journey into the shadows. Grab your headlamp and stick close, because in Yosemite, even the most experienced can become the vanished. The sacred ground and its secrets. Before we delve into the disappeared, we need to understand the ground they walked. Yosemite Valley wasn't always a tourist destination. For over 4,000 years, it was home to the Ahwanichi people, whose name literally translates to dwellers in Ahwani, their word for the valley that meant place like a gaping mouth. That translation should give you chills, because according to their oral traditions, the valley was more than beautiful. It was powerful, sacred, and dangerous. The Ahwanichi spoke of spirits that dwelled in the granite walls, entities that could snatch the unwary from mountain paths. They warned of specific locations where the boundary between worlds grew thin, places where people could step through reality and never return. Chief Tenaya, the last great leader of the Ahwanichi, reportedly cursed the land when his people were forcibly removed in 1851, declaring that the white man's intrusion would bring misfortune to all who didn't respect the valley's power. Was this mere superstition? Consider this. The Ahwanichi lived in harmony with this landscape for millennia, developing intricate knowledge of safe paths and dangerous zones. Their warnings weren't just folklore, they were survival guides passed down through generations. Yosemite spans 1,168 square miles of some of the most unforgiving terrain in North America. The park contains over 750 miles of trails winding through granite domes, deep canyons, and alpine wilderness where temperatures can plummet 40 degrees in minutes. Hidden crevasses lurk beneath innocent-looking rock fields. Sudden storms turn trails into torrents. And the sheer scale of the place means that someone could be mere yards off a popular trail and become effectively invisible to searchers. But here's what makes Yosemite's disappearances different from typical wilderness accidents. Many of these vanishings happen in areas that have been thoroughly mapped, frequently traveled, and intensively searched. We're talking about people disappearing from locations where hundreds of other visitors passed safely on the same day. The park's granite formations create unique geographical features. Slot canyons that don't appear on maps, underground caverns formed by ancient water flow, optical illusions where distances become deceiving and familiar landmarks suddenly look foreign. Some researchers theorize that Yosemite's specific geological composition creates electromagnetic anomalies that could interfere with compasses, GPS devices, and even human perception. By the 1970s, park rangers began noticing disturbing patterns in their missing persons cases. Children vanishing near berry patches, experienced hikers disappearing in good weather on well-marked trails, people found miles away from where they vanished, often in impossible locations, like the tops of cliffs they couldn't have climbed, or valleys they couldn't have reached without passing multiple checkpoints. The park reports 40 to 45 missing person cases annually, making it one of the largest clusters globally. But here's the thing that keeps rangers awake at night. The solved cases often make less sense than the unsolved ones. The vanished, a century of impossibilities. Our journey into the impossible begins in June 1909 with F.P. Shepard, who got lost on the way to Sentinel Dome. But got lost doesn't do justice to what actually happened. Shepard was no weekend warrior. He was a seasoned explorer who knew Yosemite's trails like the rooms of his own house. On that fateful morning, he set out from Glacier Point towards Sentinel Dome, a route he'd taken multiple times before. The weather was clear, the trail well marked, and other hikers were on the same path. Somewhere between Glacier Point and Sentinel Dome, reality seemed to swallow F.P. Shepard whole. Search parties combed every inch of the route for days. They found no evidence of a fall, no torn clothing caught on branches, no indication that he'd ever deviated from the main trail. It was as if he'd simply stepped through an invisible door and closed it behind him. What makes this case particularly chilling is the testimony of other hikers. Several people recalled seeing Shepard on the trail that morning, appearing normal and confident. One witness specifically remembered him checking his pocket watch near a distinctive granite formation. Another saw him consulting a map at a trail junction, then confidently heading in the correct direction toward Sentinel Dome. And then, nothing. The trail continued for less than half a mile to its destination, passing through open terrain with clear sightlines. Other hikers reaching Sentinel Dome that same day reported no sign of Shepard. He had somehow vanished from a straight, well-traveled path in broad daylight. The official search lasted 2 weeks and included some of the most experienced trackers in California. They found absolutely nothing. No footprints off the trail, no signs of struggle, no indication that he'd ever arrived at Sentinel Dome or turned around to head back. Shepard's disappearance established what would become known as the Yosemite pattern, experienced people vanishing from familiar, well-traveled routes under perfect conditions, leaving behind no trace whatsoever. Fast forward to June 1925, and the Roaring Twenties had brought a different kind of visitor to Yosemite. Frank Koenman was a vaudeville performer, a charismatic entertainer who thrived on attention and drama. He arrived at Camp Curry, a bustling tent city that served as the social hub of Yosemite Valley, ready for a summer escape from the theater circuit. Camp Curry in 1925 was like a small city. Hundreds of tents arranged in orderly rows, communal dining halls, organized activities, and constant foot traffic. It wasn't a place where someone could disappear unnoticed, or so everyone thought. On his final evening, Koenman was the life of the party. Witnesses recalled him regaling fellow guests with stories from the vaudeville stage, his animated gestures casting dramatic shadows in the firelight. He was last seen around 10 p.m., bidding goodnight to a group of admirers and walking toward his assigned tent. By morning, Frank Koenman had vanished. His tent showed no signs of disturbance. His belongings remained untouched, including a substantial amount of cash, unusual for a performer who typically lived paycheck to paycheck. His stage costume hung neatly from a rope, as if he'd been planning to perform again soon. The investigation was immediate and thorough. Rangers questioned every guest and staff member at Camp Curry. They searched every tent, every building, every inch of the surrounding area. They dragged the nearby streams and scoured the base of every cliff. Nothing. What baffled investigators was the impossibility of leaving Camp Curry unseen. The tent city was surrounded by open meadows, and the main roads were monitored by park staff. To reach the wilderness, Koenman would have had to pass multiple checkpoints and cross areas where his movement would have been visible to dozens of people. Some theorized that his theatrical background meant he'd staged his own disappearance, perhaps fleeing debts or a romantic entanglement. But as weeks turned to months with no contact, no sightings, and no use of his bank accounts, that theory crumbled. Frank Koenman had become another impossible vanishing in Yosemite's growing collection. The Great Depression brought desperate people to Yosemite, seeking either escape from economic hardship or work in the park's construction projects. Godfrey Wondrusek was both. A Czech immigrant who'd lost everything in the economic collapse, he arrived at Camp 7 in April 1933 with dreams of conquering Half Dome. Half Dome in 1933 wasn't the regulated, permit-required hike it is today. The cables were already in place, and climbers attempted the final ascent at their own risk. What made Wondrusek's case unique wasn't just that he vanished, it was where and how he disappeared. Wondrusek left Camp 7 early on a clear morning, joining dozens of other climbers heading for the Half Dome cables. The trail was busy that spring day, with witnesses placing him at various points along the route. Multiple hikers recalled seeing him at Nevada Fall, approximately halfway to Half Dome. His distinctive Czech accent and friendly demeanor made him memorable to fellow climbers. But somewhere between Nevada Fall and the base of Half Dome's cables, Godfrey Wondrusek stepped out of reality. The search effort was unprecedented for its time. Rangers traced the entire Half Dome route, interviewing every climber who'd attempted the cables that day. They rappelled down cliff faces, searched every crevasse, and employed tracking dogs along the trail. The granite face of Half Dome was scoured inch by inch. Here's what made the search so frustrating. The trail to Half Dome cables follows a well-defined path up the backside of the mountain. There are limited places where someone could deviate from the route, and all of them were thoroughly searched. The final approach to the cables crosses open granite with excellent visibility. If Wondrusek had fallen or gotten into trouble, other climbers would have seen it. But he'd simply evaporated. Local Native Americans working as guides for the park offered their own explanation. They spoke of the Half Dome Guardian, a spirit that protected the sacred granite monolith by claiming those who approached with improper intentions or insufficient respect. Some rangers privately admitted that Half Dome seemed to choose its victims, allowing thousands to climb safely while claiming specific individuals for reasons no one understood. Wondrusek's disappearance marked the beginning of what locals would call the Half Dome Curse, a pattern of unexplained vanishings on one of Yosemite's most iconic hikes. In July 1981, 14-year-old Stacy Harris went on a 4-day group horse riding trip with her father to one of Yosemite's most remote and beautiful locations, Sunrise High Sierra Camp. This wasn't a casual day hike, it was an organized expedition into the park's backcountry, the kind of trip that required careful planning, experienced guides, and substantial preparation. Stacy was an experienced outdoors enthusiast despite her young age. She'd been camping and hiking with her family for years, understood wilderness safety, and was comfortable in natural settings. On July 25, 1981, the group reached their destination at Sunrise High Sierra Camp, a cluster of canvas cabins situated near pristine alpine lakes. After settling in at the camp, the group decided to explore nearby Sunrise Lakes. The area is breathtaking, crystal-clear alpine waters reflecting granite peaks, with meadows full of wild flowers stretching toward the horizon. It's also relatively safe terrain, with good visibility and well-defined paths around the lake shores. Stacy walked ahead of the group to take photographs, accompanied by a 77-year-old man from their party. This elderly companion, feeling tired, decided to turn back and rest. He last saw Stacy continuing along the lakeshore, camera in hand, blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight. That was the last time anyone saw Stacy Ann Harris. When she didn't return to camp by evening, the group initiated an immediate search. A 9-day formal search involved hundreds of people and helicopters. The effort was massive, one of the largest missing person searches in Yosemite's history. Searchers included experienced park rangers, volunteer search and rescue teams, tracking dogs, and helicopter crews with thermal imaging equipment. They found absolutely nothing. No one ever found anything to do with Stacy. Nothing of hers was ever found. Not her camera, not her clothing, not a single footprint in the soft earth around the lakes. The search area was relatively contained. Sunrise Lakes sit in a natural bowl surrounded by granite walls with limited exit routes. If Stacy had wandered off, gotten injured, or encountered a bear, searchers should have found some trace. But Stacy Ann Harris literally vanished from Yosemite on July 17, 1981. The case has never been solved. What makes Stacy's disappearance particularly disturbing is how it fits a pattern that researcher David Paulides would later identify in his Missing 411 investigations. Due to the mysterious circumstances surrounding the event, some people attribute her disappearance to supernatural forces. The pattern includes young people disappearing near water sources, often while alone but with companions nearby, massive search efforts yielding no evidence, and disappearances occurring in areas that seem impossible to vanish from. Yosemite National Park has a strange history of people going missing and eerie occurrences, but Aris's case is particularly noteworthy given the complete lack of evidence. Professional searchers who work the case still speak about it with visible frustration and bewilderment. In their experience, missing people leave traces, torn clothing, disturbed vegetation, scent trails for dogs to follow. Stacy left nothing. The area around Sunrise Lakes was searched repeatedly over the following months and years. Hikers were asked to keep watch for any sign of the missing teenager. Seasonal snowmelt was monitored in case her body had been covered and might be revealed. Nothing ever surfaced. Today, over 4 decades later, Stacy would be in her 50s. Age progression photos show what she might look like as a middle-aged woman, still hoping someone, somewhere, might recognize her face. Her case remains one of Yosemite's most heartbreaking unsolved mysteries. Jump forward 3 decades to June 17, 2011 and the age of cell phones, GPS devices, and instant communication. Surely technology had made mysterious disappearances impossible? George Penka's case proved that Yosemite's appetite for the inexplicable was far from satisfied. George was a 30-year-old from Torrance, California, who joined a church group for a hike up the grueling Upper Yosemite Falls Trail. This isn't a casual nature walk. It's a strenuous 72-mile round trip that gains 2,700 feet in elevation, culminating at the top of North America's tallest waterfall. The trail sees thousands of hikers annually, making it one of Yosemite's most heavily traveled routes. On that June afternoon, George's group of 20 friends reached the summit around 4 p.m. They'd accomplished something challenging together, and spirits were high as they prepared for the descent. The group naturally spread out based on individual hiking speeds, a common and generally safe practice on well-marked trails. George was last seen by his companions near the top of the falls, wearing gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. He waved goodbye to friends, saying he'd meet them back at the parking area. It was approximately 4:03 p.m. on a clear, warm afternoon. George Penka never made it to the parking lot. By nightfall, when George hadn't returned, his friends contacted park rangers. The response was immediate and massive. 105 search personnel, 6 dog teams, and helicopter crews from multiple counties mobilized for a week-long intensive search operation. The Upper Yosemite Falls Trail is well-defined with few opportunities to get seriously lost. The route follows switchbacks down a granite slope, with the trail clearly visible from multiple vantage points. If someone got injured or encountered problems, other hikers would likely notice. The trail was busy that day, with dozens of people descending after George. Yet searchers found nothing. No footprints off the trail, no signs of a fall or injury, no personal belongings. George's cell phone never connected to any towers. His bank accounts remained untouched. He simply evaporated on one of Yosemite's most popular trails in broad daylight. What baffled investigators was George's experience level. He wasn't an inexperienced hiker who might panic and leave the trail. He'd successfully completed the challenging ascent and was descending familiar terrain with good weather and excellent visibility. There was no reason for him to deviate from the marked path. The search continued for years. Occasional reports of possible sightings were investigated and debunked. Seasonal searches checked areas that might have been inaccessible during the initial effort. George's family never stopped looking, distributing flyers and maintaining social media pages dedicated to finding him. George Penka's disappearance represented a new chapter in Yosemite's mystery, proving that even in the modern era, with advanced search technology and communication systems, people could still vanish without a trace on the park's most traveled trails. On September 17, 2016, 74-year-old Peter Jackson sent a text message to his son, "On my way to Yosemite." It was the last communication anyone would receive from the fit, experienced hiker from Stockton, California. Jackson wasn't your typical elderly tourist. Despite his age, he was in excellent physical condition and had been hiking solo in the Sierra Nevada for decades. He knew the mountains, understood wilderness safety, and was comfortable spending time alone in remote areas. His choice of White Wolf Campground showed his experience. It's a quieter, more primitive camping area preferred by serious outdoors enthusiasts rather than casual visitors. Jackson checked into campsite 58 at White Wolf Campground and paid for his stay through September 21st. Witnesses recalled seeing him around the campground, preparing for day hikes and appearing confident and well-equipped. Then, on what should have been a routine day hike, Peter Jackson walked into Yosemite's wilderness and disappeared. The initial search was hampered by the remote location and vast terrain surrounding White Wolf. The area includes dense forests, granite slopes, and alpine meadows stretching for miles in every direction. Unlike disappearances on popular day hiking trails, Jackson had vanished in true wilderness where search efforts face enormous challenges. His royal blue day pack was found in 2019, wedged between Aspen Valley and Smith Peak, nearly 3 years after his disappearance. The pack was in remarkably good condition, showing no signs of animal damage or severe weathering. But it was empty. No identification, no personal items, no clues about what had happened to Jackson. The location where the pack was found raised more questions than answers. The area between Aspen Valley and Smith Peak is extremely remote and difficult terrain. How did Jackson's pack end up there? If he'd fallen or suffered an accident, where was his body? If he'd encountered wildlife, why was the pack undamaged? The 3-year delay in finding even this single piece of evidence highlights the vastness and complexity of Yosemite's backcountry. Hundreds of square miles of wilderness can hide secrets for years or decades. But it also suggests something else, that Jackson had traveled much further from his campground than typical day hikers would venture. Professional search and rescue personnel who worked Jackson's case noted several disturbing elements. First, experienced hikers like Jackson typically carry emergency beacons or satellite communicators, devices that would have triggered alerts if activated. Second, the condition and location of his pack suggested it hadn't been exposed to elements for 3 full years, implying it had been protected or moved. Third, the complete absence of any other personal belongings was highly unusual. Jackson's case represents the challenges of disappearances in Yosemite's remote areas. While popular trails receive intensive search coverage, the park's vast wilderness areas can hide evidence for years. But even when that evidence finally surfaces, it often raises more questions than answers. Joel Tomazine, 31, of Denair in Stanislaus County, went missing on September 6th on a solo hike in the park. His disappearance came during the COVID-19 pandemic, when Yosemite was experiencing both reduced visitation and increased interest in outdoor recreation as people sought safe activities. The United States Army reservist planned to hike from Hetch Hetchy to Lake Eleanor, a challenging but well-established route through some of Yosemite's most beautiful backcountry. Tomazin was well prepared for the adventure. He carried proper equipment including a bright red kayak carry pouch, GPS watch, green sleeping bag, and yellow bear canister for food storage. Tomazine's preparedness made his disappearance particularly puzzling. He wasn't an inexperienced weekend warrior making poor decisions in unfamiliar terrain. As an Army reservist, he had military training in navigation, survival, and emergency procedures. His gear list showed careful planning and appropriate equipment for extended backcountry travel. The original plan was a multi-day hike from Hetch Hetchy Reservoir to Lake Eleanor, with a scheduled return by September 9th. When Tomazine failed to check in, search efforts began immediately. His bright red kayak pouch was eventually found, but empty of contents, a frustrating pattern repeated in many Yosemite disappearances. What made this case more complex was evidence that Tomazine had changed his plans, possibly extending his hike to Cherry Lake area north of Tioga Road. This isn't unusual for experienced backpackers who discover they're making better time than expected or want to explore additional areas. But it also expanded the search area exponentially. The terrain north of Tioga Road represents some of Yosemite's most remote and challenging wilderness. Dense forests, steep granite slopes, and alpine lakes create a landscape that's both beautiful and unforgiving. Even experienced hikers can become disoriented in areas where landmarks look similar and GPS signals are unreliable. As of 2025, Joel Tomazin remains missing. His case is actively investigated, with periodic searches conducted when conditions and resources allow. The discovery of his empty red pouch provides hope that additional evidence might eventually surface, but also demonstrates the frustrating pattern of finding gear without finding people. Thomazin's military background adds another layer to the mystery. Military personnel receive training specifically designed to help them survive and navigate in challenging conditions. They're taught to signal for help, mark their locations, and make decisions that maximize their chances of rescue. If Tomazin encountered problems, he should have had both the knowledge and equipment to address them. The patterns in the shadows. No discussion of Yosemite's disappearances would be complete without addressing what locals call the park's Bermuda Triangle, Tenaya Canyon. This isn't just another location where people go missing, it's a place that seems to actively hunt them. The canyon's dark reputation dates back to 1851, when Chief Tenaya of the Ahwahnechee people watched his son die in a violent confrontation with white settlers. According to witness accounts, the grief-stricken chief called upon the spirits of the land to curse anyone who violated the sacred spaces of his people. He specifically cursed the canyon that now bears his name, declaring it would claim the lives of intruders forever. Whether you believe in supernatural curses or not, Tenaya Canyon's statistics are undeniable. The area has one of the highest accident and fatality rates in the entire park. People don't just get lost in Tenaya Canyon, they experience bizarre accidents, equipment failures, and navigation problems that defy explanation. Even John Muir, the legendary naturalist who helped establish Yosemite as a national park, barely escaped Tenaya Canyon with his life in 1873. His journal describes feeling an overwhelming sense of malevolence in the canyon and experiencing vertigo and disorientation that nearly caused a fatal fall. Modern climbers report similar phenomena: compasses spinning wildly, GPS devices malfunctioning, sudden weather changes that create dangerous conditions, rock falls that seem to target specific climbers, equipment breaking in ways that shouldn't be possible. The canyon has developed such a sinister reputation that many experienced Yosemite guides refuse to take clients there. Those who do venture into Tenaya Canyon often report feeling watched and describe an oppressive atmosphere that seems to press down on them psychologically. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Yosemite's disappearances is the pattern involving children. Research by David Paulides and other investigators has identified specific characteristics that appear repeatedly in cases involving minors. Children often vanish near berry patches or water sources. They're found, when they're found at all, in areas that should have been impossible for them to reach. Their clothing is sometimes found neatly folded or removed entirely, despite no evidence of hypothermia or disorientation. They're discovered miles away from their last known location, often in terrain that would challenge experienced adult hikers. The case of 16-year-old Christine Fuentes in 1970 exemplifies this pattern. She was wading in the Merced River near Vernal Falls when she simply vanished midstream. Despite immediate search efforts and the contained nature of the river system, Christine was never found. Witnesses reported that she seemed to be pulled under by something, but no body ever surfaced downstream. Jerome Oldiges, 14, disappeared while sitting on a rock in the middle of the Merced River in broad daylight with family members nearby. One moment he was there, visible to multiple witnesses. The next moment, the rock was empty. Jerome had vanished without making a sound or causing a splash. These cases share characteristics that make conventional explanations difficult. Children don't typically wander far from safety on their own. They call out when scared or lost. They leave traces of their passage. But Yosemite's missing children seem to evaporate, leaving families with devastating questions that never receive answers. Advanced mapping of disappearances reveals disturbing geographical patterns. Certain areas of Yosemite experience far higher rates of vanishings than others, often with no correlation to visitor volume or terrain difficulty. The area around Sunrise Lakes, where Stacey Arris disappeared, has been the site of multiple unexplained vanishings over the decades. The terrain isn't particularly challenging, and the location is relatively accessible, yet people continue to disappear there under mysterious circumstances. Half Dome and its approaches have claimed dozens of people over the years. While some disappearances can be attributed to the technical difficulty of the cable's route, others occur on the approach trails in areas that should be safe for experienced hikers. The backcountry areas north of Tioga Road show another cluster of disappearances, often involving solo hikers who are well prepared for wilderness travel. The remoteness of these areas might explain why bodies aren't found, but it doesn't explain why experienced hikers with proper equipment vanish without triggering emergency beacons or leaving any traces. Perhaps most disturbing are the disappearances that occur on popular, well-traveled trails during busy periods. These vanishings happen in areas where dozens or hundreds of other people pass safely on the same day, making the selectivity of the disappearances even more puzzling. Rational analysis and conclusion. Before we venture too far into the realm of the unexplained, let's examine the rational explanations that search and rescue professionals consider for Yosemite's disappearances. Yosemite's landscape can be genuinely deadly. Hidden crevasses, unstable rock formations, and sudden weather changes create real dangers for even experienced hikers. The park's granite formations can hide bodies in cracks and crevices that are nearly impossible to search thoroughly. California black bears, mountain lions, and even aggressive deer can pose threats to humans. However, predator attacks typically leave evidence: blood, torn clothing, tracks, or remains. The complete absence of such evidence in many Yosemite cases makes wildlife attacks an unlikely explanation for most disappearances. People make poor decisions in the wilderness. They leave marked trails, attempt routes beyond their skill level, or ignore weather warnings. But this explanation falls short when dealing with experienced hikers who disappear from familiar, well-marked paths in good conditions. Heart attacks, strokes, or other sudden medical events could incapacitate hikers, causing them to fall into hidden areas or wander off trails in confusion. This might explain individual cases, but doesn't account for the geographical clustering or the complete absence of remains. Some people choose to vanish, starting new lives or ending their current ones in remote locations. However, most Yosemite disappearances involve people with strong family ties, stable lives, and no apparent motivation to disappear voluntarily. Here's what haunts me about trying to explain away Yosemite's mysteries: the sheer consistency of the inexplicable details. If these were random wilderness accidents, we'd expect to find some evidence, some bodies, some gear. The complete absence of traces in case after case suggests something more than bad luck or poor preparation. Consider the statistics. Yosemite sees over 4 million visitors annually, yet maintains one of the highest concentrations of unexplained disappearances in the world. Other national parks with similar visitor numbers, terrain difficulty, and wildlife populations don't experience the same patterns. Why Yosemite? The geographical clustering is another factor that defies simple explanation. Random accidents should be randomly distributed, but Yosemite's disappearances concentrate in specific areas that don't correlate with terrain difficulty, visitor volume, or known hazards. Most troubling is the selectivity. On busy trails where hundreds of people pass safely, specific individuals vanish without a trace. If natural hazards were the explanation, we'd expect more widespread casualties, not targeted disappearances. After researching dozens of cases, interviewing search and rescue personnel, and analyzing decades of data, I'm left with more questions than answers. The patterns are real, the disappearances are documented, the search efforts have been thorough and professional. Yet people continue to vanish in ways that challenge our understanding of what's possible. Is there something unique about Yosemite's geological composition that creates hazards we don't fully understand? Do the granite formations create electromagnetic anomalies that interfere with navigation equipment and human perception? Are there underground cave systems that haven't been mapped, creating hidden dangers that can swallow people without a trace? Or is something else at work in these ancient granite halls? Something that the Ahwahneechee understood and respected, but that modern visitors encounter unprepared? I don't have answers to these questions. What I do have is respect for the families still searching for their loved ones, admiration for the search and rescue teams who risk their lives looking for the missing, and a deep appreciation for the mystery that Yosemite represents. One argument I hear frequently is that modern technology should have eliminated mysterious disappearances. GPS devices, cell phones, satellite communicators, and personal locator beacons should make it impossible for people to vanish without a trace. Yet Joel Tomazine disappeared in 2021 carrying a GPS watch. George Penka vanished in 2011 with a cell phone. Technology hasn't solved Yosemite's mystery, it's only made the disappearances more puzzling. The reality is that technology fails in wilderness settings more often than people realize. Batteries die, devices malfunction, GPS signals bounce off granite formations, creating false readings. Cell towers don't cover remote wilderness areas. Even personal locator beacons require the user to activate them, which becomes impossible if someone is incapacitated or disoriented. But here's what really troubles me about the technology argument. Many of these devices were never found. When search teams recover a missing person's gear, electronic devices are typically among the items discovered. The complete absence of any personal belongings in many Yosemite cases suggests something more dramatic than simple equipment failure. Let me be honest about the theories I find most unsettling, not because I necessarily believe them, but because they address aspects of these cases that conventional explanations don't adequately cover. Yosemite sits on ancient geological formations that could contain cave systems and underground waterways that haven't been fully mapped. It's possible that people are falling through hidden openings into underground spaces where their bodies become permanently lost. This would explain the complete absence of remains while staying within natural explanations. While official sources downplay this possibility, some researchers suggest that an unknown predator, whether human or animal, might be actively hunting in Yosemite. This could explain the selectivity of disappearances and the complete removal of evidence. However, the geographical range and timeline of disappearances would require an organization or entity operating for over a century. Some scientists theorize that specific combinations of geological, meteorological, and electromagnetic conditions might create zones where human perception and navigation become severely impaired. People might wander into dangerous areas while experiencing a form of environmental disorientation that we don't fully understand. After researching these cases extensively, I've come to believe that we simply don't understand our natural world as completely as we think we do. Yosemite's disappearances might be revealing gaps in our knowledge about geology, wildlife behavior, or even human psychology in wilderness settings. What makes Yosemite's mystery particularly chilling is that it's ongoing. These aren't historical curiosities from a bygone era. People continue to disappear under impossible circumstances. Search and rescue teams continue to be baffled. Families continue to search for answers that never come. The Park Service maintains detailed records of missing persons cases, but they're understandably reluctant to discuss the more mysterious aspects publicly. Tourism is a massive economic driver for the region, and stories of unexplained disappearances don't exactly encourage family vacations. But the rangers I've spoken with privately acknowledge the strangeness. Off the record, they'll admit that certain areas make them uncomfortable. They'll describe feeling watched in specific locations or mention equipment failures that happen too frequently to be coincidental. Some refuse to hike alone in particular parts of the park. Despite these mysteries, I don't want to discourage people from visiting Yosemite. It remains one of the most beautiful places on Earth, and millions of people enjoy it safely every year. But I do think these cases offer valuable lessons about wilderness safety and the importance of humility in natural settings. Stay on marked trails. Every single disappearance I've researched involves someone who either left established paths or was found far from where they were supposed to be. The trails exist for reasons beyond convenience. They represent generations of accumulated knowledge about safe passage through dangerous terrain. Don't hike alone. While solo hiking isn't inherently dangerous, having companions dramatically increases your chances of surviving an emergency and getting help if something goes wrong. Many of Yosemite's vanished were hiking solo when they disappeared. Carry proper equipment and know how to use it. Emergency beacons, first aid supplies, and navigation tools are worthless if you don't know how to operate them properly. Take wilderness safety courses and practice using your equipment before you need it. Tell people your plans. Lead detailed itineraries with specific return times. The sooner search efforts begin, the better your chances of being found if something goes wrong. Trust your instincts. If an area feels wrong, if you're getting bad vibes, if your internal alarm bells are ringing, listen to them. Our subconscious often picks up on dangers that our rational mind hasn't yet processed. As I wrap up this journey through Yosemite's shadows, I keep coming back to one central question. What does it mean that these disappearances continue to happen in our modern, technological, thoroughly documented world? We live in an age where satellites track our every movement, where cell phone towers blanket the landscape, where DNA analysis can identify remains decades after death. Yet in Yosemite, people still vanish as completely as they did in 1909. That persistence suggests we're dealing with something fundamental about this place that transcends our technological capabilities. Maybe the Ahwahnechee were right. Maybe there are thin places in the world where the boundaries between what we know and what we don't understand become permeable. Maybe Yosemite is one of those places, a landscape so ancient and powerful that it operates by rules we haven't learned yet. Or maybe the explanation is simpler and more terrifying, that the natural world contains dangers we've forgotten how to recognize. That in our rush to map, measure, and master the wilderness, we've lost touch with the instinctual knowledge that kept our ancestors alive in wild places. What I know for certain is this: Yosemite's missing people were real. Their families' grief is real. The search efforts are real. The mystery is real. And until we find answers, those granite halls will continue to whisper their secrets to anyone brave enough to listen. The disappearances continue. The questions remain. And somewhere in the mist above Yosemite Falls, or in the shadows below Half Dome, the answers wait for us to become wise enough to understand them. If you've hiked these trails, if you've felt the weight of ancient granite pressing down on you, if you've heard whispers in the wind that seem to call your name, I'd love to hear about it. Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this dive into Yosemite's darkest secrets intrigued you, hit that subscribe button for more explorations into mysteries that refuse to be solved. Stay safe out there. Stay together. Stay on the trails. Because in Yosemite, the shadows have eyes, the granite has memory, and some secrets are still choosing who gets to keep them. The Sierra remembers everything, and it never, ever forgets. If you have information about any of these missing persons cases, please contact Yosemite National Park at 209-3079-1992 or the National Missing and Unidentified Person System at NamUs.gov.